I am Senée, the Princess Guide. Thank y'all so much for joining me. I'm so happy you're here. In case you don't know me, I'm a qualified mental health professional, life coach, and book author. If you'd like to get an autographed copy of one of my books, or if you'd like to schedule a personal session with me, all the information's in the description box. Now, let's talk about life. Just a second. Grab your favorite beverage while I take a sip of tea. Oh boy, I'm not gonna lie. This episode's topic is still a bit hard for me to talk about. It isn't as hard as it was 8 years ago when it happened, but it's still something I don't verbalize much. However, this is one of my most read blog topics every single day around the world, and it's been getting a lot of traffic lately, so I know it's time that we talk about it. My father died in 2014. I wrote about it when it happened, but in 2021, 7 years later, I had some realizations and my perspective of him changed in some ways. My parents divorced when I was 6, and my dad was never really in my life. I was much closer to my papa, my mother's father who raised me, than I was to my biological father. Let's be honest, he wasn't there for me to be the example of a good man every girl needs. He didn't instill the self-esteem girls need from their fathers to make good choices in love and relationships. He was absent in my life at best and left this earth without really validating me or even saying goodbye. In the months following his death, it hurt, plain and simple. My whole life I told myself it was all right that he hadn't been around because I had my papa who was a wonderful father figure and loved me beyond anything I've ever experienced. Granny used to say, "Your grandpa would lay down his life for you girls." I knew that was true. His last words to me were, "I love you, I love you, I love you." In the months following my father's death, I began to realize how his absence and negative comments toward me not only impacted my self-esteem, but they had impacted my relationships with men. I've had abandonment issues with men my whole adult life. In 2014, I began to realize that it was my father abandoning me that created the panic inside me that I had experienced. I realized I had huge walls built up when it came to guys. I told myself it was so that I didn't get hurt unnecessarily. Being cautious and guarding your castle, your heart and emotions, is very important, and I still believe we should be wise with whom we allow into our lives. However, I began to see that I not only built walls, but I had even pushed men away. Since they all had left me anyway, it seemed easier for it to happen sooner rather than later. Quote, "When a father abandons a relationship with his daughter, she can become frozen in time relationally with the opposite sex." Dr. Ken Cantfield, speaker and author of 7 Secrets of Effective Fathers and The Heart of a Father, told the First Things First website. Quote, "A 50-year-old woman may look like an adult on the outside, but on the inside, she is still working out issues that should have been attended to by a healthy, engaged father." When you are frozen relationally, it is difficult to know your place and how to develop a healthy relationship because you are working from a point of need instead of working out of a position of co-equal. There is a void in her life, and the search to fill that void prompts her to take risk in relationships, which usually result in some really poor choices, end quote. I agree with his statement and have been saying a lot lately that you can't make sound, healthy decisions when you're operating from a place of desperation and fear. I've spent the last few years working on my issues. Learning to love myself first has made the biggest impact, along with practicing gratitude in every situation. When I look back on my life before doing this intense internal work, I can see that I was operating out of a place of lack and didn't even know it. I was like a puppy dog at the feet of almost any man who approached me, jumping up and down and saying, "Love me, love me, love me." That isn't me anymore. My father named me as his next of kin, and I had to take off from my last semester of college, earning my psychology degree, to travel down to Houston to sign his burial papers. He left what little he had to a stranger's daughter. At least they were all strangers to me. All I was given was a box of his belongings. It took me 2 years before I could go through that box. What I discovered within its contents was that my father didn't live the best life himself. I knew he served in the Vietnam War and met my mother after he returned. I knew that experience messed him up psychologically, but what I didn't know was that he didn't get to finish high school because he was drafted at age 17. I can't imagine what kind of monsters would send a 17-year-old boy to kill people and be killed in war. Seeing his draft papers made me feel so much compassion for him like I've never felt before. No wonder he was the way he was. The executive functioning of the brain, located in the frontal lobe, isn't fully formed until the late 20s, usually around age 27. This is the part of the brain that governs our decision-making process. Thus, the reason teenagers and 20-somethings make poor decisions and think they're invincible. A 17-year-old doesn't have the mental capacity to handle parenthood, much less war. I always knew he was very intelligent. He had a photographic memory, something I inherited. Although mine is a little fuzzy in places, I believe it's because of my vision issues. He did get his GED and took some college courses before getting employed at NASA as a draftsman. I found several certificates of training from NASA that my dad earned. I've always been fascinated with space since I was a little girl, so having him take me to Johnson Space Center when I was a teenager and getting my sister and I into the family room behind Mission Control was an amazing experience for me. I also found that he took some college courses at the University of Houston. These accomplishments made me feel so proud of him. Dr. Wayne Dyer often said, quote, "When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change," end quote. During a 5-year period after his death, I came to view my father with love and compassion. I saw him as a broken person who did the best he could at the time. Do I believe he loved me? Yes, but much like my granny used to tell me when I would cry about not having him in my life as a little girl, "Honey, he loves you in his own way." Even as a little girl, I knew that wasn't the way I wanted to be loved. But as an adult, mature woman, I know it is what it is. He did the best he could. This is what it means to come to a place of acceptance. My heart goes out to him and hurts for him, but I also know that he's the only person who could have changed his life. I'm not responsible for that, nor can I or will I carry that for him. I have my own life to live. All I can do is release the negative energy and feelings I had toward him. I forgave him, and I now see him through the lens of compassion. I no longer blame him for my daddy issues. I've taken the steps to resolve them on my own, and in the process, I've taken back my power. I'm grateful for the role he played in my life, and I'm grateful for whatever role I played in his. While we didn't have the kind of relationship I wanted or deserved, I know it had to be this way to cause me to be the strong, caring woman that I am. I've said it countless times, and I will continue to say it. You will grieve many times throughout your lifetime, not just when someone dies. A loss is a loss, and it must be grieved so that you can heal and move forward in life. Grieving is grieving in spite of the circumstances. Dr. John Gray warned in his book Mars and Venus Starting Over that moving on too quickly before going through the entire grieving process and not giving yourself permission to feel all your feelings are two common mistakes people make. Quote, "Grieving the loss of love means fully feeling and then releasing all the painful emotions that come up when we reflect on our loss," he wrote. The goal of the grieving process is to accept what actually is, reality as it is, rather than what we wish it could be. To get to this point, we have to go through all the stages of grief, sometimes multiple times, which include denial, bargaining, depression, anger, then acceptance. Dr. Gray explained that the only way to release our attachment is to feel 4 healing emotions. Anger. Feeling and then releasing anger reconnects us to our passion for love and life. Sadness. Feeling and then releasing sadness opens our hearts to feel the sweetness of love once again. Fear. Feeling and then releasing fear provides the ability to discern what we need and can depend on now. And sorrow. Feeling and then releasing sorrow provides the ability to discern what is possible. An important part of this process is denial. Denial isn't necessarily a bad thing. It is a natural emotion, just like anger and sadness. Those things are not bad in and of themselves. We should feel them, release them, and not do anything to hurt another person or ourselves. Quote, I've been recovering many years. I've used denial many times, wrote Melanie Beattie in The Language of Letting Go. It has been a defense, a survival device, a coping behavior, at times almost my undoing. It has been both a friend and an enemy. When I was a child, I used denial to protect myself and my family. I protected myself from seeing things too painful to see and feelings too overwhelming to feel. Denial got me through my traumatic situations when I had no other resource for survival. Denial protected me from pain, but it also rendered me blind to my feelings, my needs, and myself. It was like a thick blanket that covered and smothered me. When the winds of change blow through, upsetting a familiar structure and preparing me for the new, I pick up my blanket and hide for a while. Then something happens, and I see that I am moving forward. The experience was necessary, connected, not at all a mistake, but an important part of healing, end quote. In my personal experience and observation, a person can go back and forth between these stages of grief until they finally arrive at acceptance. During my darkest time while grieving the loss of a relationship, I went through denial, depression, denial, bargaining, denial, depression, anger, depression, anger. I was never allowed to feel anger before, so it really took its toll in this process. And then finally, I came to acceptance. You may think you've worked through a stage and have gone on to another one only to realize that you still have issues in that area. It's perfectly fine and normal to go back and deal with it again. When I was working with children and families as a behavioral clinician, my trainer said, you know when a client is improving because the intense pain lessens and they cycle through the stages of grief less frequently. Quote, grief is a cleansing process. It's an acceptance process, Beattie wrote in The Language of Letting Go. It moves us from our past into today and into a better future, a future free of sabotaging behaviors, a future that holds more options than our past, end quote. It's important during this process that you not allow others to tell you what you can or should feel. Fully experience all the emotions that come. Identify them and write them down if needed so you can release them. I suggest burning this paper after writing it down. There's something about burning negative emotions put onto paper that brings a cleansing process in my experience. It also doesn't allow others to use your emotions or words against you. A loss has been experienced by you, and it is all right to grieve. Healing is an inside job. No one can give it to you, and if they did, they could also take it away. It's important during this time to feel empowered. Nothing is more empowering, in my personal and professional opinion, than to rescue yourself. Getting all the negative feelings and emotions out is the first step. It clears the way for positive thinking and feeling to rule your kingdom within. Now, let's take a few minutes to go through an exercise before we move on. When having a rough day while going through the grieving process, ask yourself, what exactly am I feeling? Am I feeling hurt? Am I feeling angry? Am I feeling sad? Am I feeling a great loss? Am I feeling hopeless and fearful of the present or future? Once you identified your feelings, allow yourself to feel them fully, especially if they're negative. However, I want to caution you to not do anything that will cause harm to yourself or others. If you need to punch a pillow, kick a soccer ball, cry, scream, or write a nasty letter to someone telling them off, then burn it or rip it up and throw it away so that no one can use it against you, then do that to release the feelings. Once you've done this, say, thank you for showing me that information. It's very interesting. I no longer need to experience this, and I release it. I send love to myself and everyone involved. I know that we all did the best we could in the moment, given the information we had available to us. I forgive myself and everyone involved. Next, use positive affirmations to encourage yourself and replace the negativity with positivity. Say out loud to yourself so that your ears can hear it and your brain can process it. No matter what happened to me, I am resilient and I will come back better and stronger than before. I am strong. Nothing has the permission to destroy me or my purpose. Regardless of how I'm feeling in this moment, the best is yet to come for me, and I anxiously await and receive it. It is often said that we cannot change what we do not acknowledge. The goal of the grieving process is to eventually, however long that may take for each person, come to a place of acceptance, being able to not only acknowledge what is, but also to not try and make it something you wish it to be. Once we accept something, if we don't like it, we are then in a state of empowerment to change it. We cannot change another person, but we can take stock of our assets and decide what we can change in our own lives. When I was training to be a recovery coach, we were told to make a list with each client of his or her assets. The population we were working with did not consist of Wall Street bankers or people of wealth. Most of them were homeless. Many of them had nothing that most people would consider an asset. Through this training, however, I began to see that the things I took for granted were actually my assets, such as having a driver's license, a public transportation pass, a phone, an address, access to a computer and the internet, and much more. When we are able to accept the reality of our lives and situations, then we can change what we don't like by using whatever assets we have to do so. I realize that some people may look at me and think I have a great life, and in many ways I do. I'm grateful for what I do have, but it isn't the life I've always dreamed about, at least not yet. I've come to the conclusion that we have to get through the grieving process. We really have to grieve the perceived losses in life to get to a place of acceptance. It's the last step in the grieving process and the only place from which we can make healthy decisions for change. As hard as this may be to fathom, acceptance actually brings us into reality so we can enjoy the gift of the present. Merriam-Webster defines the root word accept as, quote, endure without protest or reaction, to recognize as true, end quote. Personally, I don't think acceptance means we have to like what is, but we have to acknowledge that it is what it is and be all right with it and not let it bother us. In her book, The Language of Letting Go, Beatty advised that you tell yourself, quote, I know this is exactly the way it's supposed to be for the moment, end quote. That's a very freeing statement that comes with a lot of hope in the way I read it. Accepting yourself and your situation, knowing that it is only momentary and that you give it your full permission and faith to change in a positive way is very empowering. So I encourage you to take back your power today. Do the internal work outlined here and keep the faith that all things are working out for your highest good. You will get through the grief, be able to see the lessons in the process, and see the person who is gone in a new light. Thank you again for watching. I'm so grateful for you and I appreciate you spending your time with me. If you found this helpful or insightful, please like, subscribe, share with your friends, and join me for another episode soon. Remember, if you'd like to have the Princess guide you and have me work with you personally, you can log on to theprincessguide.com. That's theprincessguide.com. Until next time, keep your crown on and stay on your throne.